on the move again. Bangladesh relocates hundreds of Rohingya to a remote island despite protests from human rights groups. Can their safety be guaranteed? And why is there still no permanent solution to the refugee crisis? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Mohammed Jamjoom. 3 years ago, nearly 1 million Rohingya escaped to Bangladesh when Myanmar's military launched what the UN called a textbook case of ethnic cleansing. Many sought shelter in the world's largest refugee camp at Cox's Bazar. Now their lives are being uprooted again. Bangladesh's government has moved a second group of nearly 2,000 to a remote island. Rights groups say Bhasan Char is unsafe because it's prone to floods and cyclones. But the government insists the new camp will improve the refugees' lives, as they'll have homes, markets, and schools for 100,000 people. Tanvir Chowdhury reports from the port city of Chittagong.
Around 1,800 Rohingya refugees boarded Navy vessel in the port city of Chittagong in southern Bangladesh. They have been sent to Bhasan Char Island, where 1,600 of their fellow refugees were relocated earlier this month. Abu Saleh and his wife, who have a young child, don't know what to expect.
Most are saying things are fine over there. We are going because government told us the facilities are good over there, and so we are following their advice. No one really pressured us to go there.
Human rights groups have questioned whether the island is safe and can withstand natural disaster and floods, and whether the refugees were forced to go there against their will.
The UN, who the international community and the various governments and the diplomats in Dhaka are all looking to actually take on this assessment, are just not being allowed to go there.
Bangladesh is struggling to find a long-term solution to the Rohingya crisis. More than 1 million are living in the world's largest refugee camp at Cox's Bazar after fleeing Myanmar in 2017 during a military crackdown. The government is now looking to house some of them elsewhere. This is the second batch. The first batch went on December 4. The government is determined to relocate at least 100,000 refugees to this remote coastal island, despite opposition from rights groups and even the UN. Many Rohingya are worried about how safe the island is.
People who are willing to go there also knows the risks involved. So why are they going there? I will never go because I'm afraid.
But the commander of Bangladesh Navy in Chittagong is confident everything will be okay.
Bangladesh government has taken up a project 3 years back, and before taking up this project in Bhasan Char, and detailed study has been carried out by international firm. Nowhere in the world any government has created such kind of project, that in my knowledge goes. So this is something that Bangladesh is proud of, and we believe that Myanmar government will soon take them back to their country. Until then, they are in safe hand in Bhasan Char.
With no means to earn a living and a congested living condition at Cox's Bazar, some Rohingya refugees decided to take the chance.
Life is hard in the camp and it's difficult to earn a living there. They said they will provide us with better living facilities and means to earn a living.
3 years on, Rohingya refugees are increasingly frustrated. They don't have a voice in the decision-making process and feel their fate and destiny is at the mercy of others. Tanvir Chowdhury, Al Jazeera, Chittagong.
All right, let's bring in our guests. Joining us from Vancouver is Rohingya activist Yasmin Ullah. In Colombo, Saad Hamadi, South Asia campaigner at Amnesty International, who focuses on Bangladesh. And Dr. Ambia Parveen is chair of the European Rohingya Council and co-founder of the Rohingya Medics Organization. Bangladeshi government representatives declined our invitation to appear on the program. Welcome to you all. Yasmin, let me start with you today. Bangladeshi officials in the Bangladeshi government have said repeatedly that there are not going to be any transfers to Bhasan Char unless they are voluntary, unless the refugees are willing to go. What are you hearing about that? Do you believe those claims? Do you think that there are refugees who have been coerced to go? Have you heard that from any of the refugees you've been speaking with?
Unfortunately, yes. I am hearing a lot of reports around not entirely coercion, but various different tactics that are used in order to convince people to relocate to Basan Char. A lot of those have to do with promises of food rations or promises of better lives, promises of resettlement in a third country in the cases that Bangladeshi government allows for Rohingya refugees to get exit permit or to get a designation as refugees in terms of, being identified as such. As we all know, that it is not the ways that Bangladeshi government is terming Rohingya right now. We are called the displaced Myanmar nationals, and all of this is very problematic in various different ways. Some reports that I've heard was that once the family or people that agree to go, their houses would be locked away and they would not be able to have access to those places that they used to live in. Some have to do with financial, monetary value. And a lot of times when we look at this, I want us to look at this as an imbalance of power. One is a refugee, a group of people that are actually in dire situations. There hasn't been enough food rations to go around, at least for the past few months. And that has put a lot of strain on the mental health, the physical health, and the various different ways of, their outlook to the world. And obviously that presents a lot of urgency in changing, in, doing things very differently. And so it's much easier for people to be convinced in that sense when they are vulnerable themselves.
Saad, Amnesty International has collected evidence, has collected testimonies from refugees that you've spoken with who have indicated that there are refugees that have been either coerced or forced to go. Have you not?
There are two phases to it. So before the relocation happened, about 2 weeks before that, Amnesty International interviewed refugees who've been on the list for relocation and were signed in as early as November. And among them, Amnesty International interviewed refugees who said that their shelters were damaged, and when they went to the camp authorities to have them fixed, they were suggested to relocate to the island instead. There's one woman who said that her husband has been on the island since May, and as you're aware, that there's been about 300 Rohingya refugees who've been moved to the island when they came back after being stranded in the sea for months. And so her husband has been there since May, and she felt that he would not be able to come back to the mainland in Cox's Bazar. And she felt that it's better to reunite with her husband on the island, because being a single parent and the mother of a son, she was not able to cope up at the time when Amnesty spoke to her, and she felt that it's better to relocate. But in the anecdotes that I'm sharing with you, it does look like it's more of a compulsion rather than a choice that some of these refugees have chosen to go to the island. It's not the standard definition of voluntary decisions that we understand. And this is stemming from a lack of transparency in the participation process or the consultation process, whichever you choose to recognize as, with the Rohingya refugees, as well as the humanitarian actors who have been supporting Bangladesh with managing the refugees. In a protracted refugee situation where you have the international community extending the support, and it is very much required that the international community shares their responsibility to support Bangladesh with managing such a large number of refugees, it's important that there is a due process being followed in order to ensure that the refugees are safe, they're protected, and they're able to return to their homes in Myanmar in safe, voluntary, and dignified conditions, and sustainable conditions as well, without violating the principle of non-refoulement. But this is not an exception for relocation within the country as well. And particularly when we're talking about this relocation to Bhasan Char, there is a lack of clarity in terms of how voluntary these decisions have been, simply because there is no policy framework that outlines the participation of Rohingya refugees in the decisions that affect them.
Ambia, Bangladesh's government has said repeatedly that the facilities on these islands will provide a much better life for Rohingya refugees than they have in the camps in Cox's Bazar, which has become the world's largest refugee settlement. What have you heard about how life on the island is? I mean, Bangladeshi officials have said there's going to be schools, there's going to be supermarkets, they're going to have access to medical care, there's going to be cell phone towers. How concerned are you about what conditions on the island are going to be like? And what have you heard from refugees who have been relocated there?
Thank you for having me here. With our other panelists, I would like to add that, Bangladesh and its government has been our long life friend who was always there for us, who has given us shelters, refuge to us, and then also humanitarian aid. They were always there for us, and they knew what we wanted and our main co-solution of the Rohingya plight. But on the other side, what they have done right now with the relocation, they have been talking about it since 2018. It is not a new, but due to the international pressure and plea from the Rohingya itself to the government, they have taken this step, which has hurt us, saddened us, and also it's a tragedy. And but on the other side, we can understand the Bangladesh government and its public that it's a sign to the international community, the frustration. It has been almost like after the last exodus, 3 years right now, there is no mount pressure to the Myanmar government, and there is also no sincerity from the government of Myanmar to repatriate these people. So the Bangladesh government has no other choice, because it's itself being a smallest country, the most poorest country of the world. How can they take care of this 1.1 million Rohingya people? And the other side, for the last 3 years, as I've said, that there has been no single repatriation with the full demands that we are requesting. So they had to take that action. And we have spoken, ERC, the European Rohingya Council, has frequent contacts, especially after these relocations. We have talked to the people or spoke to the people from the Bhasan Char Island and within the Cox's Bazar in the refugee camp. And majority of them, it's not voluntarily, and as you know that since April and May, there have been 300 Rohingyas has been rescued who were trying to go to Malaysia. They were sent back to the COVID-19, and at those days, Bangladesh government has quarantined these 300 girls and women and children and men by saying that they will be rejoining with their people or with their relatives to Cox's Bazar after staying for 2 weeks, which has not have happened. And not only that, we have evidences, we have seen the videos, we have seen the audios that there were some girls were making hunger strike because they were not happy staying over there. They said they had no facilities at all. There were no education, there were no hospitals, there were no facilities for the hospital, education, livelihood, and all those stuff. And suddenly the government is telling us that there will be some livelihoods which we are not aware. And if the government is the Bangladesh government, if it is really so sincere and so transparent, why are they not allowing the UN? And yesterday also there was a tweet from the special rapporteur who would like to go to this Bhasan Char Island and assess and see what's going on. So we don't know exactly what is going on there. We have heard, but let us see and watch. But it was, as long as I would like to say, it's a sadness what has happened. It's a tragedy for these vulnerable people who are continuously traumatized, and then they are forcefully deported.
Ambia, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I want to pick up on a point you were making and ask Yasmin. I'll get back to you about that point you were making in just a few minutes. Yasmin, you heard Ambia there talk about the sheer magnitude of the refugee crisis in Cox's Bazar. You're talking about more than 1.1 million Rohingya refugees. I've been to those camps many times in the past. It's really hard to explain to people just how densely packed they are and how horrific the conditions are, because a lot of people just can't understand unless they've been there. You and I have spoken about this before, but I want to get to the point that Bangladesh's government has said that they're going to transfer up to 100,000 refugees to Bhasan Char. That number, when you compare it to the number of people in Cox's Bazar, is that really going to be able to alleviate pressure in the camps? Is that really going to be able to help the conditions in the camps if only 100,000 people are transferred to this island and you still have over 900,000 people, refugees, in these camps?
I think this is a problem of issues that are intertwined in so many different ways. When we look at the framing of all of these issues, we often are fixate on the actions that are being carried out, rather than why those actions or the actual driving forces of those actions in the first place. In this case, the actions carried out by the nation state, Bangladesh, there are often much more going on behind the scene. Specifically, the hate rhetoric that are rising within Bangladesh politics, political landscape. There has been more news pieces, more opinion pieces that are being written in racializing and otherizing Rohingya. There are mobilization of the local community of accusing Rohingya of stealing jobs, or working 80% of the staff being Rohingya people themselves in the Rohingya response. There are also issues around Rohingya human rights defenders being silenced and being surveilled by the intelligence agencies of the Bangladeshi government, as well as one of the amateur photographer who was actually arrested without charges, and he's still being detained to this point, past 24 hours, and this is by Bangladeshi standards illegal. All of this is to show that there are real concerns around putting away and actually making sure that Rohingya are out of sight, out of mind. In a sense that it responds to the political cries or the demands that are rising within the country, but also it really isn't answering the larger question of how to manage or how to actually plan for the sustainable solutions in not just repatriating Rohingya, because that's not going to happen. We all understand that Burma is actually adamant about not accepting or admitting that it has actually committed genocidal crimes or mass atrocities at that. So in trying to find a superficial answer to the questions, we see these attempts, and they are desperate. It's not just the reflection of the failure within the management by Bangladeshi government. It is a collective responsibility, and it is the establishments and institutions, actors that are involved, UNHCR, the international communities that are actually not ensuring the safety net for Bangladeshi government. Hence, why we're seeing these sort of attempts. But also,
Yasmeen,
it is a penalizing. Yes.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you too. We are starting to run out of time, so I want to get to Saad as well and pick up on a point you were making too, because Saad, Yasmeen was talking about, the responsibility of international actors, the responsibility of the UN. You've said many times, Amnesty International has said many times that the international community must do more to ensure, safety of the Rohingya, and also to make sure that the conditions are being created so that they can someday return to Myanmar in a safe and dignified manner. Are we any closer to seeing that happen?
Unfortunately not. And I'm afraid we must also recognize the fact that Bangladesh has been host to this 1 million Rohingya refugees for the last 3 years. These refugees have been living in cramped conditions in the camps in Cox's Bazar. It is not the most livable standard that anyone would aspire, and no one wants to live in a situation like this away from their homes. There is definitely that desire that someday they'd be able to go back to their homes. We have interviewed the Rohingya refugees many times in the camps, and we've heard those responses that we'd want to go back to our homes when it's safe, when our rights are recognized, when we're given the citizenship that's a right for every individual in their country. But those conditions are not there yet in Myanmar, and the violence that has been documented by rights organizations, including Amnesty International, in Myanmar are as recent as this year. So under the circumstances, I'm afraid to say that there is no clear ground to sort of go for a repatriation at this time. And there's no clarity of when this can happen until there is a guarantee. Those human rights safeguards are put in paper by the authorities in Myanmar. The accountability is ensured in terms of the crimes that have been committed. Because you and I and all of us here understand that the Rohingya have gone through horrific crimes and have fled those to come to Bangladesh and live in a situation, a dire situation that no one wants to live. And under the circumstances, we're seeing that the Bangladeshi authorities are now, as part of a plan to decongest the camps, are going for a relocation to an island. But this relocation itself, I think, would be more transparent with this participation process guaranteed through policy framework, which is not something we're seeing at this time. And yeah, I'd like to conclude there and come back later if there's a chance.
Ambia, you were referring in your last answer to the issue of health care for Rohingya refugees. And, I wanted to pick up on another aspect of that. In the past couple of weeks, I've been speaking to refugees in Cox's Bazar, and a lot of them are telling me that, one of the things that they're experiencing right now is sort of a re-traumatizing event because there are so many who are afraid that at some point they might be compelled to go to Bhasan Char, and they're afraid that they will have to go there and uproot themselves once more. And they say that that's really another form of trauma for them to live through compared to all the other trauma they've lived through up until now. So I want to ask you, when it comes to mental health care for Rohingya refugees, do they have access in those camps? Is there enough mental health care, to help them with the severe levels of PTSD that they have experienced these past few years and all the other forms of trauma that they've lived through?
Mr. Jamjoom, as you said, we Rohingyas have been suffering from daily stress, and all of us are almost traumatized or having the post-traumatic stress disorders. And due to this, from the last exodus, the people who are living inside the camp, and even also in Arakan, we have been with this repatriation, relocation, some other issues are coming, and all the time, something or the other have been always put us in a process where we are re-traumatizing. So this kind of things right now, which is not really, not a transparent, it's involuntarily this relocation, it's also traumatizing, and there are not enough counseling centers or the centers which are really meant for the intensive patients wards. So there is not enough, and beside that, we can never ever heal. And due to the lack and plus this tremendous pressure from the Bangladesh government with the relocation, and also plus with the stress factors we are daily facing. So this is very important that the Bangladesh government and the international community, whenever they do something, they should be very fragile with these people, because they are the ones who are the vulnerable genocide survivors. They have been traumatized. They are daily going through lots of stress factors, daily stress factors, and they are not getting the proper psychosocial support. So that's why it is very difficult, at this time to re-traumatize them, and it should be an alarming point for the international community and for the Bangladesh government to handle these people. Therefore, it is very much important that it should be a voluntary relocation. It should be it should be, according to their wishes, and it should be transparent too.
All right, well, we have run out of time, so we're going to have to leave the conversation there. Thank you so much to all our guests, Yasminullah, Saad Hamadi, and Dr. Ambia Parveen. And thank you, too, for watching. You can see the program again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. And for further discussion, go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. For me, Mohammed Jamjoom, and the whole team here, bye for now.